Hi, my name is Phil and a warm welcome to Festool TV. On here I have an example of a corner joint. It could be used for a table or it could be used for a bed. And creating this type of joint with a domino jointing system is a very quick, easy and simple way to work. But for large items of furniture, these quite often need to be transported. And a quick and easy way would be to have a joint which you can also take apart for transportation, which can then be reassembled on site. And this is where we can use this type of connection system from Festool. These are quite often referred to as KD fixings or knockdown fixings. And this means that I can put the components into the material, I can then tighten the joint together, but if I need to move the item of furniture, I can then take the joint apart very simply. These are used in exactly the same way as the timber dowels from Festool as well. So the next stage is to show you how we can work with this type of connection system. So with the leg and the rail, I want to make sure my rail is connected to my leg. And of course, I've got my face marks in position, so I know exactly where I'm going to be working from. I also want to leave a small step here of 5mm and to ensure the two top pieces are flush where they come together. The first stage that we work with is going to be with the leg. Any marking out that needs to be done when working with the domino jointing system is very simple and easy to do as well. But the first stage I need to do is to set the machine to 25mm to this position, but also to set my height for 25mm. I want to make sure I've got a 5mm step at the top so we can undo the fence, bring this up, and then along here where I've got my depth setting, I can then go to the 25mm mark and then drop the fence into position. The first cut that we're going to be making will take this part of the connection system. And as soon as this goes into the timber and then the bolt is inserted, it means that this will expand. And when it expands into the timber, it will basically lock the fixing into position, so we achieve a really strong, tight joint. There's one thing to remember. I also need to make sure I leave enough material here to withstand the compression of when the bolt is secured into the timber. So, with a height of 25mm and a depth setting of 25mm, we're then ready to make the first cut. But of course, I don't need to do any other marking out on my material because I have a series of reference points with these pins that I can use with a Domino XL as well. So my first cut is going to be made using this pin here. My second cut is going to be made using the pin nearest to the cutter. So the next stage is to make the two cuts, and then we can insert the first fixing. So while I'm working with the pins, I have one to reference, and then when the second cut has been made, I can then put the next pin into position, and then we can make the next cut. And for the rail, all I do is repeat this type of process. So now this fixing can go into position on the top. So here I'm going to have one of the KD fixings, and then in this position here we're going to have one of the timber dominoes as well. Having the two combined will create a very good joint, but also prevents any movement of the joint as well. So with the leg, at that stage we can then go on to look at jointing the rail onto the leg. And so the next stage is to make sure that we're using the pins in exactly the same position to replicate the two cuts that we just made. The next cut that we make needs to be at 50mm, and this will allow for this section here of our connection system. From this position to here is where we're going to be working from. So we need to adjust the depth on the domino to 50 millimetres, we can bring this tab up to that position. The timber I'm working with is 40 millimetres in thickness, so I can set my depth of cut to 20 millimetres. And this means that my joint will be exactly dead centre while I'm working. So the two cuts, or the cut that I've just made on the top section here, will take this part of the domino. But I also need to make a small access slot here to give me access to this Allen key bolt here. And this will lock the whole joint into position. Of course, I also need to mark a line, but rather than use a square, I can use the reference points on the domino at this triangle and also this centre line to make two pencil lines. And this will give me the reference point for my next cut. So we can now mark the two lines in this position and also the centre line here. So what this has now given me is the exact dead centre of where my first cut was made. I need to make a slot in this position here, and this gives me access point for the Allen key for this part of the connector. And this means that by having this access point, I can bring the two halves of the connector together to form a really strong joint. So the next stage is to work in the vertical position. And because we're working on an MFT table, we can use this profile along here for the clamp. And now I can work in this position. So the depth of cut into the timber is going to be at 30 millimetres. This gives me a little bit of extra room on the bottom of the slot so that the main part of the bolt can find its way into the connector. So for the depth of cut, we can change to 30 millimetres here. We can bring the slider up into that position. And for the height, we need to adjust the front fence to 40 millimetres. And now, because I've got the reference point here from the two pencil marks, I can use the centre line along here to line up the machine, and then we can make the cut. So that's where the cut has been made. It's in exactly alignment with the initial cut that we made for the main part of the connector. So our next stage now is to bring the two halves together by fitting the rest of the connectors onto the slots that we've made. So now with the leg component that we cut first time round, I can put in this bolt. This will go into the threaded insert, and we can then tighten this into position. And as we're tightening this up, this is opening up these two areas here. And this gives me a really good clamping pressure on the inside of the joint. And it's worth pointing out here that on the inside of the leg, there's a small recess section here, and this will be where, when the rail goes onto the side, we can have the access point. And by having this circular section here, the Allen key bolt will find its way into the slot. So we also have a couple of plastic sections which form the domino profile, and these can be clamped or fitted onto the edge of this bolt. And then we can just clamp those into position. And of course, to make sure we have a really firm, strong joint without any twisting, we can also fit a timber domino into the slot below. So that's the leg section completed, and now all we need to do is to fit the next component into this slot. So we can fit that into there. We can just push this home. And we can just use an Allen key to bring the screw back a little bit. And so the next stage is to bring two components together. My rail can go to the leg. And then where we cut the access point, we can then tighten the two components together. And so, of course, to finish off the work within this type of system, we can then put a decorative cover onto the access point. And so we have a neat finish on the inside. We have a perfect finish on the outside. But the really good thing is that we have a very stable and strong joint using this type of connection system from Festool. But don't forget, the big advantage also is that if we needed to transport a piece of furniture, the big advantage of working like this is that we can take the two components apart. So if we just undo the Allen key, just take the Allen key bolt from the slot, we can then take the two components away, and so we have an easy way of transporting something. This section here can also be removed as well to make sure that no damage happens to that component. So, working within this type of connection system, quite commonly known as a knockdown or KD system, brings many types of advantages, and it's no different to working with a traditional timber domino. So, thank you very much for watching. I hope this has helped, and I'll see you again on the next presentation.